Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Harbinger, watching the stars through the main view screen. The ship had been traveling through deep space for 3 weeks, mapping new systems for the Earth Colonial Authority. It was quiet work, but Jake preferred it that way. After 20 years in the military, he enjoyed the peace of exploration missions. Lisa Warren, his tactical officer, looked up from her console. Her blonde hair was tied back in a regulation bun, and her blue eyes showed concern. "Captain, we're picking up something strange on long-range sensors." Jake walked over to her station. "What kind of strange?" "It's a transmission. Very weak, but it's definitely artificial, not natural space noise." Lisa adjusted her controls, trying to clean up the signal. "Sir, I think it might be from an alien source." Ryan Torres, the chief engineer, looked up from his own station. The stocky man had been working on engine efficiency reports, but the mention of aliens caught his attention. "How far away is it coming from?" "The Kepler 442b system," Lisa replied. "That's about 40 light years from here." Jake frowned. The Kepler system was in Vorthak space. The Vorthak Empire was one of the most advanced alien civilizations humans had encountered. They were also one of the most arrogant. In every previous contact, the insect-like aliens had treated humans like primitive children. Amy Brooks, the communications specialist, raised her hand from her station. "Captain, I'm getting more of the signal now. It's definitely Vorthak, but something's wrong with it." "Wrong how?" Jake asked. Amy was a small woman with dark hair and sharp features. She was the best linguist in the fleet, fluent in 12 alien languages. Right now, she looked puzzled. "The tone is all wrong, sir. Vorthak communications are usually very formal and proud. This sounds desperate." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Vorthak were never desperate. They were too advanced, too powerful. If something had made them desperate, it was probably bad news for everyone else in the galaxy. "Put it on speakers," he ordered. The bridge filled with the clicking, buzzing sounds of the Vorthak language. Even through the static, Jake could hear something different in the alien voices. Fear. Amy worked frantically at her console, running the signal through translation programs. "I'm getting pieces of it, sir. They're talking about something called the Devourers, and they're asking for help." "Help from who?" Ryan asked. Amy's face went pale. "From us. From humanity." The bridge fell silent. Jake stared at the speakers as more Vorthak voices joined the transmission. Even without understanding the language, he could hear the panic in their clicks and buzzes. "Are you sure about the translation?" Jake asked. Amy nodded slowly. "I'm running it through 3 different programs. They're all saying the same thing. The Vorthak Empire is requesting immediate military assistance from the human governments." Lisa pulled up a star chart on the main screen. "Sir, the Vorthak have over 300 worlds in their empire. Their military is at least 50 times larger than ours. What could make them ask us for help?" Jake didn't have an answer. The Vorthak had always seen humans as violent barbarians. They had refused every human offer of trade or cooperation. During the last diplomatic meeting, a Vorthak ambassador had called humanity a species of primitive mammals who solve problems with violence. Now those same aliens were begging for help. The transmission continued for another 10 minutes. Amy worked steadily, translating what she could. Slowly, a terrifying picture emerged. The Vorthak were talking about entire star systems going dark, fleets of ships that vanished without a trace, worlds stripped bare of all life and resources. "Captain," Amy said quietly, "they're saying the enemy isn't biological. It's machine intelligences. They call them the Devourers because they consume everything in their path." Ryan leaned forward. "Machines? Like robots?" "More than that," Amy replied, listening to another burst of transmission. "They're saying the Devourers turn everything they capture into more machines. Every ship they destroy becomes part of their fleet. Every world they conquer becomes a factory to build more of them." Jake felt his blood turn cold. An enemy that grew stronger with every victory was the worst possible threat. "How long have the Vorthak been fighting them?" Amy translated more of the signal. 2 years, sir. And they're losing badly. The message says they've already lost 17 star systems." 17 systems, Lisa whispered. "That's billions of people." The transmission changed tone. Now it was a single Vorthak voice, speaking slowly and clearly. Amy translated in real time. "To the human governments and military forces. We are Fleet Commander Zex Thara of the Vorthak Imperial Navy. Our empire faces total destruction from an enemy beyond our ability to defeat. We have heard reports of your species' unusual military tactics and request immediate assistance. Jake raised an eyebrow. Unusual military tactics was a polite way of saying humans fought dirty. The Vorthak commander continued. We offer full access to our technology databases, star charts of uninhabited worlds suitable for human colonization, and favorable trade agreements for the next 1,000 years. We will consider any reasonable terms for your assistance. Amy paused in her translation, then added quietly, Sir, he's also saying they would accept human military command of their forces if necessary. Ryan nearly fell off his chair. The Vorthak would accept human commanders? They think we're primitive. The transmission wasn't finished. The Vorthak commander's voice grew more urgent. The Devourers are currently 3 months away from our core worlds, where over 10 billion civilians await evacuation. Our remaining fleet can delay them but cannot stop them. If our core worlds fall, the enemy will have access to our complete industrial capacity and population centers. They will become unstoppable. Amy stopped translating as the message ended. The bridge was quiet except for the hum of the ship's engines. Jake stared at the star chart, thinking. The Kepler system was 40 light-years from human space. If these Devourers consumed the Vorthak Empire, they would eventually reach human worlds. Earth's military was strong, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Lisa, send a priority message to Earth Command. Full diplomatic encryption. Tell them we've received a request for military assistance from the Vorthak Empire against an unknown enemy called the Devourers. Yes, sir, Lisa replied, her fingers flying over her console. Jake looked at the image of the Kepler system on the main screen. Somewhere out there, one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations was facing extinction. The same aliens who had mocked humanity's violent nature were now begging for help from those same violent humans. Amy, record everything we've received and prepare a full linguistic analysis. I want to know exactly what they're asking for and what they're offering. Already working on it, sir, Amy replied. Ryan cleared his throat. Captain, if these Devourers are as dangerous as the Vorthak say, shouldn't we be heading back to Earth immediately? Jake considered this. The smart thing would be to run home and prepare Earth's defenses. But something told him that running wouldn't be enough. If the Devourers could defeat the Vorthak Empire, they could probably defeat humanity too. Unless humanity did what they did best, find a way to win when everyone else saw only defeat. Set course for Earth maximum speed, Jake ordered, but keep monitoring for more transmissions from Vorthak space. I have a feeling this is just the beginning. As the Harbinger turned toward home, Jake wondered what Earth's leaders would decide. Would they help the aliens who had always looked down on them, or would they let the Vorthak face their fate alone? Either way, Jake knew one thing for certain. When the galaxy's monsters came calling, humanity would answer. The only question was whether they would answer as saviors or as something far more dangerous. Admiral Patricia Hayes sat at the head of the massive conference table in the Global Defense Command Center. The room was deep underground beneath Geneva, built to survive nuclear attacks. Today it might need to survive something much worse. Around the table sat the most powerful military leaders on Earth. General Marcus Cole represented the Sol Defense Force, the military branch that protected Earth's solar system. Dr. Elena Vasquez spoke for the Xenobiology Institute, the organization that studied alien life forms. Director Carl Thompson ran Strategic Intelligence, Earth's spy network that operated across dozens of star systems. Patricia looked at each of them before speaking. She was 60 years old with gray hair and steel blue eyes that had seen 3 wars. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem. Captain Morrison's report has been confirmed by our deep space monitoring stations. The Vorthak Empire is facing complete destruction. General Cole leaned forward. He was a large man with a scarred face and missing left hand from the Centauri rebellion. Ma'am, with respect, the Vorthak have never been our friends. They've blocked our expansion into 4 different star systems and called us barbarians in every diplomatic meeting. That's exactly why this is so terrifying, Dr. Vasquez interrupted. She was a small woman with dark skin and intelligent brown eyes. The Vorthak military doctrine is based on overwhelming technological superiority. If something is defeating them this badly, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Patricia nodded and activated the holographic display in the center of the table. A 3-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, showing human and Vorthak territories. Large red zones marked where the Devourers had already struck. This is what our intelligence has gathered so far, Patricia said. The enemy calls itself the Devourers. They began their attack on Vorthak space 2 years ago. Since then, they have completely consumed 17 star systems. Director Thompson studied the map with cold eyes. He was a thin man in his 50s who rarely showed emotion. When you say consumed, Admiral, what exactly does that mean? Dr. Vasquez touched a control and the display zoomed in on one of the red zones. Complete resource extraction. Every planet stripped down to the core. Every asteroid and moon harvested. Even the stars show signs of mass extraction. Marcus Cole whistled low. How is that even possible? The Devourers appear to be machine intelligences, Dr. Vasquez continued. But not like any artificial intelligence we've encountered before. They don't just destroy things. They convert matter directly into new machines. Every ship they capture becomes part of their fleet. Every world they take becomes a factory. Patricia highlighted several areas on the map. According to Vorthak intelligence, the Devourer fleet has grown from approximately 1,000 ships to over 50,000 in just 2 years. They're not just winning battles. They're absorbing everything they defeat. Director Thompson leaned back in his chair. That explains why the Vorthak are panicking. Fighting an enemy that gets stronger with every victory is a nightmare scenario. It gets worse, Dr. Vasquez said. She pulled up technical data on the screen. The Devourers have adaptive programming. They learn from every tactic used against them. The Vorthak tried energy weapons, kinetic bombardment, electronic warfare, even biological attacks. Nothing works twice. General Cole studied the battle reports. The Vorthak fleet started with over 2 million ships. Now they have less than 100,000 operational vessels. In 2 years, they've lost 95% of their military. Patricia nodded grimly. And the Devourers are still accelerating. Current projections show them reaching the Vorthak core worlds in less than 3 months. After that, they'll have access to the Empire's main industrial centers and population of 10 billion. The room fell silent as everyone considered what that meant. 10 billion more minds and bodies to fuel the Devourer war machine. Director Thompson broke the silence. Admiral, I have to ask the obvious question. Why should we help them? The Vorthak have been nothing but hostile to humanity. This might be our chance to eliminate a future threat. Dr. Vasquez looked shocked. Carl, we're talking about genocide on a massive scale. I'm talking about survival, Thompson replied coldly. If we let the Devourers weaken themselves against Vorthak defenses, we might be able to defeat both enemies when they're exhausted. General Cole shook his head. That's assuming we can defeat the Devourers at all. If they absorb the entire Vorthak Empire, they'll be unstoppable. We need to fight them while they're still manageable. Patricia had been listening to the debate while studying casualty projections. The numbers were terrifying no matter which option they chose. Alana, what do we know about Devourer technology? Could we reverse engineer their systems? Dr. Vasquez pulled up technical schematics. That's the most frightening part, Admiral. We've analyzed the wreckage from several battles. Devourer technology isn't just advanced. It's impossible. Impossible how? Marcus asked. They violate several laws of physics, Dr. Vasquez explained. Their ships show no signs of reaction mass for propulsion, but they can accelerate at thousands of gravities. Their weapons convert matter to energy at 100% efficiency. Their manufacturing systems create complex electronics from raw atoms in minutes. Director Thompson frowned. Are you saying they have technology that shouldn't exist? I'm saying they have technology that suggests they didn't develop naturally, Dr. Vasquez replied. This level of advancement would take millions of years of development. But according to Vorthak records, the Devourers appeared suddenly 2 years ago with no prior contact or warning. Patricia felt a chill run down her spine. An enemy with impossible technology that appeared from nowhere was every military planner's worst nightmare. Do we have any idea where they came from? The Vorthak tracked their point of origin to an empty region of space beyond the galactic rim, Dr. Vasquez said. No stars, no planets, nothing. They just appeared and began moving toward populated space. General Cole studied the star charts. If they came from outside the galaxy, they might be refugees from somewhere else. Maybe they consumed their own galaxy and moved on to ours. The thought hung in the air like a death sentence. An enemy that had already consumed an entire galaxy was beyond anything humanity had prepared for. Patricia made her decision. Gentlemen, lady, I'm authorizing Operation Prometheus. We will respond to the Vorthak request for assistance. Director Thompson looked surprised. Admiral, are you sure that's wise? Carl, if we let the Devourers finish with the Vorthak, they'll come for us next. Better to fight them now while we still have allies, even reluctant ones. General Cole nodded approvingly. What kind of force deployment are we talking about? Patricia activated another display showing Earth's military assets. Everything. I want every combat-capable ship, every Marine division, every special operations unit. This will be the largest military mobilization in human history. Dr. Vasquez looked worried. Admiral, that will leave Earth virtually defenseless. Earth will be defenseless anyway if the Devourers win, Patricia replied. Our only chance is to stop them in Vortex space. Director Thompson studied the deployment plans. How do you want to approach the Vortex? They're desperate, but they still think we're primitive. Patricia smiled for the first time in the meeting. It wasn't a pleasant smile. We'll give them exactly what they asked for. Human military assistance. They just might not like what that means. General Cole grinned back. Are you authorizing unconventional warfare protocols? I'm authorizing whatever it takes to win, Patricia said. The Vorthak wanted to see how monsters fight. We'll show them. She stood up and the others followed. Operation Prometheus begins immediately. Marcus, I want the fleet ready for deployment in 6 weeks. Elena, prepare full technical analysis packages on everything we know about Devourer capabilities. Carl, I need intelligence assets in place before our ships arrive. As the meeting broke up, Director Thompson approached Patricia privately. Admiral, there's something else you should know. I'm recommending we activate Protocol 7. Patricia's face went pale. Protocol 7 was humanity's most classified military doctrine. It was so ruthless that only a handful of people even knew it existed. Carl, that's genocide protocol. Yes, ma'am, and it might be our only chance to win. Patricia stared at the star map, thinking about the choice she was about to make. In a few months, the galaxy would learn what humanity was truly capable of. She just hoped there would be anyone left to remember the lesson. Admiral Kevin Clark stood on the bridge of the UES Leviathan, watching the Vorthak home system grow larger on the main screen. Behind his flagship, the largest human fleet in history spread across space like a metal constellation. 300 ships carrying humanity's best warriors to a war they might not survive. Captain Nicole Murphy's voice crackled over the communication system from her ship, the UES Reaper. Admiral, we're receiving docking instructions from Vorthak Command. They want to meet in person. Kevin nodded. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm brown eyes that had seen too many battles. Acknowledge their request, Nicole. Tell them I'll meet with their commanders in 2 hours. Colonel Steve Parker's transport ship was already moving toward the Vorthak station. His 10,000 Marines were the best fighters humanity had ever produced. They were also the most dangerous. Steve had volunteered his men for this mission knowing they might never come home. Commander Ben Carter's stealth ships were invisible on the sensors, already spreading throughout the system to gather intelligence. Ben was a quiet man who specialized in missions that officially never happened. His job was to find the enemy's weaknesses and exploit them without mercy. The Vorthak orbital station was massive, built from some kind of biometal that grew like living tissue. As Kevin's shuttle approached, he could see the insect-like aliens waiting in the docking bay. They were 7 feet tall with hard shells and multiple arms. Their faces showed barely controlled disgust at having to work with humans. Fleet Commander Zexithera met Kevin at the airlock. The Vorthak leader was larger than most of his species, with scars across his shell that spoke of many battles. When he spoke, his voice buzzed with electronic translation. Admiral Clark, we welcome human assistance, though we question whether your primitive tactics will be effective against such an advanced enemy. Kevin smiled politely. After 25 years of dealing with aliens, he was used to insults disguised as diplomacy. Commander Zexthara, we appreciate your confidence. Perhaps you could show us your current defensive positions. The meeting room was designed for Vorthak anatomy, with raised platforms instead of chairs. Kevin and his officers stood while the aliens arranged themselves in a complex hierarchy that put the humans at the bottom. It was a subtle insult that Kevin ignored completely. Zexithera activated a holographic display showing the system's defenses. We have positioned our remaining fleet in standard formation around the 4th planet. Our energy shields will funnel the enemy into a killing zone where our heavy weapons can engage them effectively. Kevin studied the formation with growing concern. The Vorthak had arranged their ships in perfect geometric patterns that looked impressive, but offered no flexibility. Their defensive plan relied entirely on superior firepower and technology. Captain Nicole Murphy, who had joined the meeting, pointed at the display. "Commander, what happens if the enemy adapts to your weapons?" Zexithara's antenna twitched with annoyance. "Our weapons are the most advanced in the galaxy. The Devourers cannot simply adapt to quantum disruptors and antimatter torpedoes. But they have adapted before," Colonel Steve Parker said quietly. "According to your own reports, they've neutralized every weapon system you've used." "Those were older technologies," Zexithara insisted. "We have upgraded our arsenal specifically to counter their adaptive capabilities." Kevin exchanged glances with his officers. The Vorthak still didn't understand what they were fighting. They thought better technology would win the war, but the Devourers turned technological advantage into their own strength. Commander Ben Carter spoke for the first time. "Have you considered asymmetric warfare? Guerrilla tactics? Psychological operations?" The Vorthak officers recoiled as if Ben had suggested something obscene. Zexithara's voice buzzed with outrage. "We are an honorable species. We do not engage in barbaric tactics like sabotage and deception." Kevin felt a familiar feeling in his stomach. It was the same feeling he got before every battle where the enemy underestimated humanity's willingness to do whatever was necessary to win. The alarms began sounding 3 hours later. Long-range sensors detected the Devourer fleet approaching the edge of the system. Kevin stood in the combined command center, watching the enemy formation on the tactical display. The Devourers moved in perfect coordination, thousands of ships advancing like a single organism. Their vessels were sleek and black, with no obvious weapons or engines. They simply glided through space with terrifying purpose. "Contact in 30 minutes, announced a Vorthak officer. "All ships report ready for combat." Kevin activated his communication link to the human fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Clark. Execute Plan Alpha, weapons free on my command." The battle began exactly as the Vorthak expected. Their fleet opened fire with devastating energy weapons that lit up space like miniature suns. The first wave of Devourers disappeared in brilliant explosions. Zexithara clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. "You see? Our new weapons are highly effective against their hulls." Kevin didn't share the alien's confidence. He watched the tactical display as more Devourer ships advanced through the weapon's fire. The second wave took less damage. The third wave seemed almost immune to the quantum disruptors. "They're adapting," Captain Murphy reported from the Reaper. "Their hull configuration is changing in real time." Within minutes, the Vorthak weapons became completely ineffective. The Devourers advanced steadily, their return fire cutting through energy shields like they didn't exist. Vorthak ships began exploding all around the formation. "Impossible," Zexithara buzzed frantically. "Our calculations showed those weapons would remain effective for at least 6 hours." Kevin had seen enough. The Vorthak way of war was already failing, just as it had failed for 2 years. It was time to show the galaxy what human tactics really meant. "All human ships, execute Protocol 7, authorization Clark Alpha 77. The human fleet suddenly broke formation and scattered in all directions. The Vorthak officers watched in horror as their allies apparently fled the battle. "Admiral Clark, what are you doing?" Zexithara demanded. "We cannot win without coordinated fire support." Kevin ignored the alien commander and focused on his own officers. "Ben, are your infiltration teams ready?" Commander Carter's voice was calm despite the chaos around them. "Stealth ships are in position. Marine boarding parties are loaded and standing by. Nicole, what's the status on the viral packages?" Captain Murphy's reply came through weapons fire and explosions. "Upload systems are ready. We just need physical contact with enemy hulls." Kevin smiled grimly. The Vorthak had no idea what they were about to witness. "Steve, are your people ready for close quarters combat?" Colonel Parker's laugh was genuinely frightening. "Sir, my Marines have been waiting their whole lives for this kind of fight." What happened next would be talked about in military academies for centuries. Instead of engaging the Devourers in conventional space combat, the humans did something no civilized species had ever attempted. They infiltrated the enemy fleet. Ben Carter's stealth ship slipped between the massive Devourer vessels like ghosts. His teams attached themselves to enemy hulls and began cutting their way inside. Once inside, they didn't fight the machine soldiers. They reprogrammed them. Steve Parker's Marines boarded Devourer command ships through holes blown in their hulls. But instead of trying to destroy the enemy computers, they infected them with viruses designed to turn the Devourer's own learning algorithms against them. Nicole Murphy's ships released thousands of small drones that looked like space debris. When the Devourers tried to absorb them for raw materials, the drones activated and began broadcasting false tactical data directly into the enemy network. The effect was devastating. Devourer ships began firing on each other as their targeting systems received conflicting information. Their adaptive programming started adapting to threats that didn't exist, creating weaknesses the humans immediately exploited. Most terrifying of all, the humans began feeding the Devourers false memories. The enemy's learning system absorbed fake battle data that taught them to fear tactics the humans hadn't even used yet. Sexithara watched the battle with growing horror. What are they doing? This is not warfare. This is madness. Kevin finally turned to face the Vorthek commander. Commander, you asked for human military assistance. This is how humans fight wars. We don't try to overpower our enemies. We turn them into weapons against themselves. The tide of battle had completely reversed. Devourer ships were shutting down their own systems, fleeing from imaginary threats and attacking their own formations. The perfect coordination that made them so dangerous had become their greatest weakness. But even as victory seemed certain, Kevin felt no satisfaction. He knew what the galaxy would think of humanity after today. They had shown the universe that there were worse things than machines that consumed worlds. Sometimes the real monsters were the ones who saved you. Commander Dan Foster moved carefully through the twisted corridors of the Devourer command ship. His Marine team had cut through the hull 20 minutes ago, and now they were deep inside the enemy vessel. The walls around them pulsed with strange lights and the air hummed with electronic noise. "Keep your weapons ready," Dan whispered to his team. "We don't know what kind of defenses they have inside these things." Sergeant Mike Rodriguez checked his scanner. "Sir, I'm reading massive data storage ahead. Looks like their main computer core." Dan nodded. Their mission was simple: plant a virus in the enemy computer system and get out alive. But as they moved deeper into the ship, Dan noticed something strange. There were no crew quarters, no life support systems, no signs that living beings had ever been aboard. "This is weird," said Corporal Linda Hayes, the team's technical specialist. "These ships are built like computers, not like vessels designed for crews." They reached the computer core, a massive chamber filled with crystalline structures that sparkled with flowing data. Linda immediately went to work, connecting her equipment to the alien systems. "Sir, you need to see this," Linda said after a few minutes. Her face had gone pale. "These aren't just machines. There's something else in here." Dan looked at her scanner readings. "What kind of something else?" "Consciousness patterns. Thousands of them. Maybe millions." Linda's voice was shaking. "The computers aren't just running programs. They're running minds." Meanwhile, on the research vessel UES Darwin, Dr. Ashley Rogers was analyzing data from the captured Devourer systems. Ashley was a xenoarchaeologist, someone who studied ancient alien civilizations. What she was finding in the enemy computers was beyond anything she had expected. "Captain Bell, you need to look at this immediately," Ashley called to her commanding officer. Captain Laura Bell hurried over to Ashley's workstation. Laura was a scientist herself, but she had never seen her research staff look so disturbed. "What have you found?" "The Devourers aren't what we thought they were," Ashley said, pulling up files on her screen. "They're not invaders or conquerors. They're refugees." Laura stared at the alien text scrolling across the screen. "Refugees from what?" Ashley activated a translation program, and the alien symbols became readable English. "From the heat death of their galaxy. Their original species called themselves the Architects. Their home galaxy was dying, all the stars burning out. They uploaded their consciousness into these machines to survive." The data told a story that made Laura feel sick. The Architects had watched their entire galaxy slowly die over millions of years. As the last stars faded, they had made a desperate choice. They turned themselves into machines and left their dead galaxy behind, searching for new sources of energy to keep their consciousness alive. "They don't consume worlds because they want to conquer them," Ashley continued. "They consume worlds because that's the only way they can continue to exist. Every planet they strip feeds energy to billions of digital minds." Back on the flagship, Admiral Clark was preparing for the final assault on the Devourer mothership when he received Ashley's report. The news hit him like a physical blow. For 2 days, the human fleet had been systematically destroying what they thought were mindless machines. Now he learned they had been killing the last survivors of an entire civilization. Fleet Commander Zexthara was standing beside Clark when the report came in. The Vorthak leader had been watching human tactics with a mixture of admiration and revulsion. Now his antenna twitched with satisfaction. Excellent news, Admiral Clark. Now we know these abominations are truly evil. They chose to become monsters rather than accept natural death. They must be completely destroyed. Clark stared at the tactical display showing the remaining Devourer ships. Each one represented thousands or millions of ancient minds trying desperately to survive. Commander Zexthara, they're not evil. They're terrified. They have consumed 17 star systems. Zexthara buzzed angrily. They have killed billions of my people. Their motivation does not matter. Clark understood the Vorthak's anger, but he also understood something else. The architects had faced the same choice every species eventually faced: extinction or transformation. They had chosen transformation, even if it meant becoming something terrible. Captain Bell's voice came over the communication system. Admiral, I found something else in the data. The architects didn't start by attacking living worlds. They spent thousands of years consuming dead systems and empty space. They only began attacking inhabited worlds when they ran out of alternatives. Dr. Ashley Rogers added her analysis. Sir, their original programming was designed to avoid harming other life forms. But their survival instincts have been overriding their ethical systems. They're literally going insane from the conflict between wanting to live and knowing they're killing others to do it. Clark felt the weight of command pressing down on him. The easy choice would be to finish destroying the Devourers and let the galaxy celebrate humanity as heroes. The hard choice was to find another way, even if it meant being seen as weak or foolish. Colonel Parker's voice interrupted his thoughts. Admiral, we have a problem. The Vorthak are monitoring all our communications. They're demanding that we execute all captured architect consciousness immediately. Clark looked at Zexthara, who was clicking his mandibles in approval. The human commander understands the necessity. These digital parasites cannot be allowed to survive. They are an infection that must be purged. They're not parasites, Clark said quietly. They're people. They're just people who refuse to die. Zexthara recoiled as if Clark had struck him. You cannot be serious. They have murdered billions. They consume entire worlds. How can you call such monsters people? Clark thought about the choice the architects had faced. Watch their entire species die as their galaxy went dark, or find a way to survive even if it meant becoming something horrible. He wondered what humanity would do if faced with the same decision. Commander Zexthara, what if it was your species facing extinction? What if the only way your people could survive was to do terrible things? Would you choose death over survival? The Vorthak leader's response was immediate. We would die with honor rather than become monsters. Clark nodded slowly. That's the difference between your people and mine. Humans will become monsters if that's what it takes to survive. The question is whether we can find a way to survive without staying monsters. Captain Bell had been listening to the conversation. Admiral, I think there might be a third option. The architect consciousness could be sustained using artificial energy sources instead of stripped worlds. We could build containment systems that would keep them alive without harming anyone else. Zexthara's antenna went rigid with shock. You cannot be considering allowing these creatures to live. They are a threat to every living being in the galaxy. They're only a threat because they're desperate, Clark replied. If we give them a way to survive without consuming worlds, they might stop being a threat. Colonel Parker's report came in from the Marine teams. Sir, we've made contact with several architect consciousness in the captured systems. They're asking to surrender. They say they're tired of killing and want to find another way. Clark made his decision. All human ships cease fire. Begin containment operations on all disabled Devourer vessels. We're taking prisoners, not executing them. Zexthara's voice rose to a shriek. This is madness. You are betraying every species they have murdered. The Vorthak Empire will never accept this decision. Clark looked at the alien commander with calm eyes. Commander, your people asked for our help. You're getting it. But you're getting it on our terms, not yours. As news of Clark's decision spread through both fleets, the reactions were immediate and violent. Half the Vorthak ships began powering weapons to fire on the surrendering Devourers. Human ships moved to intercept them, and suddenly the alliance was on the verge of collapse. Clark realized that saving the architects might mean fighting the very people he had come to help. But he also knew that how humanity handled this moment would define them for the rest of galactic history. The real test wasn't whether they could defeat their enemies. It was whether they could show mercy to them. Lieutenant Commander Peter Griffin stood on the observation deck of the UES Vigilant, watching the construction of the first Architect containment station. 3 months had passed since the battle at Kepler 442b, and the galaxy was still trying to understand what humanity had done. The station was massive, built from both human and salvage devourer technology. Inside its energy chambers, thousands of Architect consciousness lived in simulated worlds that required no real planets or resources. It was the first time in galactic history that a total war had ended with rehabilitation instead of extinction. Peter's communication console chimed with an incoming message. Commander Griffin, this is Captain Hayes aboard the diplomatic vessel UES Harmony. We're receiving another request for human military advisors. Peter smiled as he recognized Susan Hayes's voice. Susan had been promoted to captain and put in charge of humanity's new diplomatic corps. It was a job that kept her busy, as more species requested human assistance every week. Which species is it this time, Susan? Peter asked. The Rigel Confederation. They're facing a rebellion on their outer colonies, and their traditional military tactics aren't working. They specifically asked for human advisors who understand unconventional warfare. Peter shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, most alien species considered human military tactics to be barbaric and dishonorable. Now they were lining up to learn those same tactics. The galaxy's perspective on humanity had changed completely. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The species that other civilizations had called monsters were now seen as the galaxy's most valuable protectors. Not because they were the strongest or most advanced, but because they understood how to fight enemies that conventional tactics couldn't defeat. Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice came over the station's communication system. All personnel, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Architect Research Facility. Peter hurried to the command center, where Commander Alex Turner was coordinating the Architect Rehabilitation Project. Alex was one of the few humans who could communicate directly with the digital consciousness, and his reports were always fascinating. What's the status update, Alex? Peter asked. Alex looked tired but hopeful. The integration is going better than expected. The Architect consciousness are adapting to life in simulated environments. More importantly, they're starting to help us understand technologies we never thought possible. On the main screen, an image appeared of one of the simulated worlds where the Architects now lived. It looked like a paradise, with crystal cities and flowing energy rivers. The digital beings had created art and music that no biological species could imagine. They're not just surviving, Alex continued. They're thriving, and they're grateful enough to share their knowledge freely. We've already learned how to build faster-than-light communication systems and zero-point energy generators. Peter studied the technical readouts. The Architects had millions of years of scientific development stored in their digital minds. By saving them, humanity had gained access to technologies that would advance human civilization by thousands of years. But the real change wasn't in technology. It was in how other species viewed humanity's decision-making process. Captain Susan Hayes's report arrived as a holographic message. She appeared in the command center looking professional in her diplomatic uniform. The Rigel Confederation isn't the only species asking for help, Susan reported. We've received similar requests from the Centauri Alliance, the Tau Ceti Republic, and even the isolationist crystal entities. They all want the same thing: human military advisors who can find solutions that pure logic can't reach. Alex leaned forward. What exactly are they asking us to teach them? Susan's expression was thoughtful. That's the interesting part. They're not asking for our technology or our weapons. They want to understand how we think, how we find alternatives when everyone else sees only two choices: victory or defeat. Peter understood what she meant. The galaxy had watched humanity face an impossible decision at Kepler 442b. They could have chosen revenge and destroyed the Architects completely. They could have chosen weakness and let the Devourers continue consuming worlds. Instead, humanity had found a third option that nobody else had considered. The communication console activated again with an urgent signal. This is Captain Jake Morrison aboard the UES Prometheus. We're receiving a long-range transmission from the edge of the galaxy. Peter felt a familiar chill. Jake Morrison was humanity's most experienced first contact specialist. If he was calling with an urgent message, it meant they had encountered something significant. Put him through, Jake. Jake's face appeared on the screen. He looked older than Peter remembered, with new lines around his eyes and gray in his hair. Peter, we've made contact with a species called the Harmony Collective. They've been fighting a war for over 1,000 years. Against who? Alex asked. Something called the Entropy Lords. According to the Harmony Collective, they're beings of pure energy who consume the life force of entire star systems. Sound familiar? Peter exchanged glances with Alex. Another ancient enemy that grew stronger by consuming what it defeated. Another species facing extinction from an impossible foe. What do the Harmony Collective want from us? Peter asked. Jake's smile was sad but proud. That's what's different this time. They're not asking us to be their saviors. They've heard about what we did with the architects. They want us to teach them how to save themselves without becoming monsters in the process. The transmission continued with more details. The Harmony Collective was a peaceful species that had been fighting a defensive war for centuries. Their enemy, the Entropy Lords, seemed to be similar to the Devourers but made of pure energy instead of machines. The Harmony Collective specifically mentioned our mercy to the architects, Jake reported. They said they don't want to defeat the Entropy Lords if it means becoming like them. They want to find a way to stop the threat without losing their souls. Alex whistled softly. They're asking us to be their conscience as well as their advisors. Susan's holographic image nodded. That's what I've been seeing across the galaxy. Species aren't just asking for our military expertise. They're asking for our moral guidance. They want to know how to make the hard choices without losing what makes them civilized. Peter thought about the responsibility that humanity had accepted. They had become more than just another military power in the galaxy. They had become the species that other civilizations turned to when they needed someone who understood both the necessity of violence and the courage required for mercy. The final transmission of the day came from Admiral Patricia Hayes on Earth. Her image appeared on the main screen, looking pleased but exhausted. Gentlemen, I have news from the Galactic Council. The Vorthak Empire has officially severed all diplomatic relations with humanity. They consider us contaminated by our mercy toward the architects. Peter felt a moment of sadness. The alliance with the Vorthak had been costly to maintain, but losing it still hurt. Admiral Hayes continued. However, 12 other species have requested formal military alliances with humanity. Not because they fear us, but because they trust our judgment. We've received more diplomatic requests in the last 3 months than in the previous 50 years combined. Alex smiled. So by refusing to be monsters, we've become the galaxy's most trusted allies. That's exactly right, Admiral Hayes replied. The galaxy has learned that there are worse things than species who fight dirty. The worst thing is species who fight dirty and never choose to stop. Peter looked out at the Architect Containment Station, where thousands of digital beings were learning to live without consuming worlds. Soon, the UES Prometheus would travel to Harmony Space to help another species find alternatives to total war. He activated his personal log to record the day's events. The galaxy begged for mercy and humanity answered. But the real question was never whether we could be merciful to our enemies. The question was whether we could be merciful to ourselves. As the stars wheeled overhead, Peter reflected on humanity's new role in the galaxy. They had become something unprecedented, a species that other civilizations trusted to make the impossible choices. Not because they were the strongest or smartest, but because they understood that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is choose compassion over vengeance. The monsters from Earth had become the galaxy's conscience, and the universe would never be the same.